Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Ecosystem Aces. I'm Chip Rodgers, Chief Partner Officer at WorkSpan. And gosh, excited to be joined this morning by Robin Ritenour. Robin, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Chip. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so Robin, you and I worked together a number of years ago at at SAP, and since then you've Salesforce and Adobe and Marketo and had now you're at Google, and so you've hit all the bright spots in the technology world. Right?
Yeah, it's been the perfect time to come into the tech industry and to be at the right time at the right place for all of those companies. So I've been lucky more than I think I've been opportunistic.
Well, it's always a combination of there's always an element of luck in everyone's winding career, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, Robin, why don't we maybe we'll start. I'd love to hear a little bit about what you're currently at Google and working with a lot of partners, especially the scale partners, and maybe let's dive into that a little bit. Tell us a little bit about what you and your team are up to at Google these days.
Yeah, so part of our team's mandate is to help our partners go from a new partner to accelerating to productivity. And so our team, we have a group of advisors who support a new partner coming on board and having a conversation on where they want to build their practice around Google. And then more importantly, how do you build a go-to-market motion with us and ultimately get the attention of the field. And in those conversations, we've seen a lot of trends, and we with those trends, we've started to provide that advisement to our startups. So on the tech side, it's interesting when we meet new entrepreneurs who are starting a technology company. They come in saying, I want to be different, and I want to go forward, and I want to build something great, and which is super. But there's a lot of tactical, I'll call them go-to-market hacks, perhaps, on how they should be looking at their business.
Yeah.
And I'm always surprised because it seems obvious to me, but not necessarily to some of these new entrepreneurs coming in. Some examples of that, and you and I talked about this, I think, a while back, is if I'm a new technology company, I was talking to one from the Nordics the other day, and they said, "How do I go to market with Google?" And the first questions that we always ask is, what is your ICP? What is your value proposition in terms of your technology? And then we start asking questions about their adjacencies. And a lot of times they don't think about the partnerships. And again, from a partnership mindset, where do you sit in your customer stack? So if you have 35, 40, 150 customers, taking a look across your segment and what we call minimum viable stack, or lowest common denominator of the buying propensity of those customers.
Yeah.
Very often you have Salesforce, you have your HR. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
ServiceNow, if you're enterprise.
Yeah.
And so they don't know where they sit in terms of the adjacencies of some of these larger players and the value of the data that they're creating in their customer stack. They're trying to solve a problem instead of looking holistically at one, where they sit, and then two, are there partnerships that they can start to build to be pulled in because they have 35 examples in their ICP already. I think that makes sense.
Yeah. So it's so interesting because it is really, I think, startups look at the opportunity with Google and the as a huge cloud player, right? With sales teams all over, marketing activities happening all the time. It's like, oh, I'm just gonna plug into this big machine and it's just going to take off. And it's so much more than that, right?
Yeah, and it's funny. Before I started at Google, I was advising a number of companies who were built on Google, and the other piece is we've got a big startup program now, but we didn't then. And it was the first question I would come in is, what are you built on? Built on Google. Well, how's your partnership? Well, we don't have one. And there's so much opportunity between one being built on Google and then two, how do you leverage the go-to-market? Mm-hmm. But in addition to that, understanding the value of one, the data you're creating, right? Because from a Google perspective, that's important to us. Mm-hmm. And then two, and I'll go back to there is when you take a look across all of the customers, there is especially at the industry level, groups of these ISVs that sit around kind of a core stack. And it's one of the things that we're starting to take a look at, like how do we bundle some of these ISVs into solutions, and our SIs are doing the same thing. But you have the sales and operations efficiency, like the gongs and the sales lofts. Mm-hmm. You have marketing apps. It was at the time like Marketo, but I would even consider Marketo more core. And some of the integrations into Marketo would have been more along the akin of a startup. But being able to understand, like in retail, I sit with, I worked for Bluecore for a while. So Bluecore Analytics and a CDP, integrated into, a CRM or a marketing app and into email was actually its own solution. So their recognition of where they sat and sitting with other ISVs in a very large number of customers became, let's go partner with Lytics, who actually may have looked like a competitor in the real world, but was actually being used by their clients in a very joint, integrated, data solution. And so talking to these young entrepreneurs about thinking through the partnerships that they could put together in terms of their go-to-market and creating a much stronger value proposition to their end client.
Yeah. So I love this idea you mentioned of minimum viable stack, right? So I think it is really an interesting concept, right? Because so often today, when you're going to market, you're not just going to market alone, right? There's Google as a cloud provider. There might be an SI or system integrator, and typically there is, right? But then also these other adjacent technologies, and how do you fit, and how do you fit within that overall stack? So how do you help sort of educate and bring that to life for startups?
Yeah. So there are companies who help do the research if you take a look across the let's say 3 industries that you feel like are strong industries for you, and then can you understand what the APIs are, the integrations, and what we do is we show them, look, we'll do the research and we'll pay for the service for you, and then you can work with us from and not necessarily Google, because I've done this at previous companies as well, but we will go to market with you once we determine what is the value of where you sit in terms of the end customer. And when they understand, again, I don't think we take advantage of our install base or customer success as a route to market. And we always think about greenfield or spenders. Mm-hmm. We don't think about the customer success managers who are constantly looking for a reason to talk to an end customer. And if you create a program around the customer success managers to say, hey, we've identified in these 15 customers in retail or manufacturing that they are missing these 2 ISVs in various stack configurations, and you teach the CSMs on how to approach the customer and say, look, if you had this ISV, here's the data that you would have in the insights between, you know, these potentially 3 ISVs plus CRM equals X, Y, or Z. So you're selling what they're missing in terms of insights. And so you're creating one, value for the customer success manager, you're creating value for the end customer, and frankly, you're creating stickiness for, you know, whatever the core technology, if it's Google or Marketo in that case, or even Adobe in terms of those ISVs.
Yeah. And so, you know, what you're talking about is partnerships, right?
Partnerships. It's it's and it's thinking about partnerships in a lot of different lenses, right? So it's like partnerships with customer success and that route to market, partnerships with who might look like co-opetition or competitors, are actually huge opportunities to work together to pull each other through. And then the bigger, you know, we used to call them the moons and the suns. And the earths, you know, the bigger rocks. And I'll use Salesforce as an example. You know, App Exchange exploded because Salesforce was in so many, you know, stacks. But the opportunity, again, for these new startups to start thinking now about what those partnerships look like, and more importantly, you know, where you can build them to start to pull yourself through, especially as a new startup, to start to show more integrated data value or integrated, you know, process value, et cetera.
What's the reception been?
It's actually great because you know, again, when you're an entrepreneur, you think about your ICP and you think about how you're going to go out and get new customers. And very often, and you know, this is a partner person, if you get into partnerships early and you try and build that out before you have revenue, or you end up not, you know, we call the revenue to investment line for partnerships. Are you showing the value of partnerships, et cetera? And it's hard for a new company to figure out where to invest. This is a very low cost investment, but very high return, and very high return in terms of, you know, how they start looking at their strategy earlier, and who they should be partnering with. And as they start to build their partner program, or who they should join in terms of their partner programs to take advantage of the value that those go-to-market support, in terms of they already know that the integration is going to be potentially a pull-through for them. So being able to start thinking about partnerships early without having to invest in them, but leveraging the investments in other people's partner programs because you've identified, you know, the adjacencies, for startups is really important. They don't have the money to build out a partner program at that point. So, you know, leverage other people's in order to drive your penetration into the market.
So your overall sort of program and role is around scale partnership, you know, the scale partners, which means a lot of smaller partners. How are you reaching people? This is a global role you have, right? So how do you manage all that? How do you, you know, sort of deploy it and get connected to partners and have them feel like they're connected to Google?
Yeah, that's a good question. So if you think about, and I try and use this example, wealth management. So you have high net worths, wealth managers, and it's usually like one-to-one, and you have a personal relationship with your manager. And so that's like the GSIs. And then you get sort of the middle management where it's like 1 to 50 or 1 to 100. So that middle, you know, wealth manager will have 100 clients. So you feel like they're calling you and you can go in and talk to them or pick up the phone and say, hey, I need a transaction. When you are just starting to manage your retirement and your wealth, you end up getting a portfolio manager. And so they may have 200, 300. And the way that they engage with you is you sign up for newsletters or information. You may get an outbound saying, hey, you have something in your portfolio that I would recommend taking out. But what they're doing is they're identifying across, you know, the 1,000 people that they have under them as having, you know, I'm just going to joke about this, AWS and their portfolio, and then we really think you should take that out. But that communication, that engagement looks like it's one-to-one, but they're sending it out to 1,000 people because they've identified that they have that in their portfolio.
Right, right.
So the way we've built this is the same way. We do a lot of portfolio management based on the data that we have on where the partners want to play and build their practice.
Mm-hmm.
And based on that, we are doing, we'll call it inbound to the partner, or outbound from us, outbound to the partner, communications based on the data or based on how we want them to behave, or communications and enablement and go-to-market assets that they can use to go to market, because they've said, hey, workspace is important to me. So here's an entire workspace go-to-market kit, and we'll do webinars. So we also, within our group, because we would be considered the tail, we have our own triage of our partners. So we have top partners who are fast growers or high potential. We have developing partners who are coming up that ramp and starting to show productivity over and over again. Opportunistic, which is the big group of partners who might do a deal here and there. And then we have incubation or acceleration of new partners coming on. How fast can we get their practices growing? And how fast can we get them to transactions and productivity? So the way we did this is we built a group of shared services. And so we can, across all partner sets, help them with coverage model at scale, go to market at scale. And we do that through packaging and metrics through the entire funnel. We have a PBDR program that we're just starting, which would be a shared service. We have IPEs as opposed to partner engineers. We have scaled partner engineers. So instead of having like 1 to 10 on PDM managed, so partner development managed, we have IPEs, and we have a desk in each region. So based on expert requests and architecture reviews or technical wins, we use them programmatically. If we have a view of the pipeline, which we do, and we have a bunch of S2s, we'll go in and give that list to the partner engineers and say, work with our partner advisors on these S2s to try and accelerate them through the pipeline, and they'll proactively go out. So this is the way that not only can we engage with them at scale, but we can also start to manage the pipeline at scale and programmatically.
And IPE stands for?
Inside Partner Engineer.
Inside Partner Engineer. I figured P and E was Partner Engineer. I wasn't sure what the I was for. So.
Oh yeah, it's little I. So we call our partner advisors IPDMs, which probably not. They're not really doing PDM work. They're doing portfolio management and partner practice acceleration.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So the holy grail, I think, for partners coming on board and trying to work with Google is connecting with the field and co-selling, and then ultimately transacting through the marketplace. Talk a little bit about that, because these are startups, right? So they're not like a big company that's going to get a lot of attention from the field. How do they think about it? How do they get plugged in? How do you help? Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. On it's funny. We're just transforming our entire ISV coverage program, specifically around marketplace. We have had coverage, but not at the extent. So what I just described was for our self-service, and for our ISVs and our tech startups. We have a program around coverage, but also acceleration. So if you think about a partner, and partners know this, there's a maturity curve when they come and join your partner program. And it's, getting the certifications, right? Yep. Enablement, and there are milestones which you can measure. And based on those, there's activities that you need them to go through to hit those milestones. So we programmatically build in this acceleration program to get them to productivity, or to get them to co-sell readiness, or to get them to, we'll call it transaction readiness. And once they're there, at scale, again, being able to take a look at ISVs by industry, looking at ISVs by process or line of business support, makes it easier to start to take a look at the ones that, and again, this actually goes back to minimum viable stack. What is the most prevalent ISV and what's missing, so that you can start to prioritize those ISVs in the tail in terms of where they're sitting by segment, by industry, and then, what are the customers, what's procurement look like across a common set of customers, and that'll help you prioritize also which ISVs are starting to take off and that are becoming important in terms of customer stack or customer process requirements.
So, I think for Google, it's like as you grow and start hitting those milestones, then they ISVs would want to get to ISV Connect, right? Like into that program to be able to.
Yeah, there's a maturity curve that they come in, they join the program, that make sure they get into ISV Connect, which is the deal reg, then make sure that they become co-sell ready. Yeah. Make sure that they listed on Marketplace, not necessarily in that order. Mm-hmm. And when they hit some of those milestones, and hopefully, here's the other thing, there are ISVs that are driving consumption for Google and ISVs that are driving consumption for the customer based on how they're built. So right. There are different routes to market based on how they are supporting either Google's consumption or the customer's commit drawdown. And so you have to take that into consideration in terms of how you build the go-to-market, because for the FSR, driving the customer consumption might be important, or driving Google's consumption because it helps their commission. Right. Again, based on where they sit. And so that go-to-market is as important as, once you get them onto the marketplace, then, how do you help the field understand the importance of them? And again, I'm going to say, I still think customer success and install base is underrated as a potential route to market or go-to-market accelerator for a lot of these ISVs.
Interesting. And FSR, just for everyone, is field sales rep.
Yes.
Yeah, basically sales team members. Yeah. So talk a little bit about Marketplace. I think it's really critical for ISVs to get listed and then transact through either public or private offers. So that then you're plugged into some of the compensation programs and incentive programs and things like that. How to talk a little bit about that part, and how for the scale partners, how do you help enable that and message those kinds of needs?
Yeah. Again, we're transforming we'll call it the tier 3 scaled. And again, and I'll say this, we are trying to build more services for them because of the portfolio management. But as they go through and we get them listed on Marketplace and we get them co-sell ready, again, from a compensation perspective, are they comp eligible once they're on Marketplace? And then it makes it easier to build the go-to-market with them when they're on Marketplace. There are, again, once they're listed, there are multiple ways that we can create a go-to-market for them. We can work with our SIs who have their own ecosystem of ISVs. And a lot of times these ISVs are already part of that ecosystem. So how do you start helping them figure out how to leverage, like with Capgemini or Deloitte or Accenture, they all have their own kind of preferred ISVs.
Sure.
Second thing is resellers. The opportunity to go to market through resellers or distribution, and that's another large opportunity that a lot of our ISVs haven't taken advantage of. And then four is making sure that we have a very clear industry value for them, and so that from an industry perspective, they become potentially a preferred ISV, so that we can drive them towards the field, and the field can say, you can transact off of the Marketplace, which becomes important in terms of how we look at our transactions, and then more importantly, being able to track where these ISVs are, their commits, and our ability to continue to help the value those ISVs across our customer base.
Yeah. And then, of course, being able to close business with the closed business, right? And use the pre-commit, spend. That you can only do that if you're transacting in the marketplace, right?
You can only do that if you can transact on the marketplace. Yeah. So, yeah, and there's a lot of benefits from the tier 3 ISVs. Tier 1 and tier 2 for us are a lot of the larger ISVs, but there are quite a few. There's marketing spend. There's some credits. So again, in the startup program, there's value from a new build perspective, and then once you get onto Google Cloud, then our go-to-market motion becomes really important with the co-sell and the marketing assets and the marketing benefits and credits that we have. We have an internal team. We have a number of marketing internal teams who are helping with the packaging for those ISVs at scale. And I don't think that those values, again, because we're transforming this model now, and you'll start to see this probably first quarter, more of that scaled motion, and then the value of being in that tier.
Yeah. Robin, this has been fantastic. Gosh, I really appreciate you sharing so much about the scale partners and partnering with Google. Maybe before we sign off, love to hear something that you've maybe picked up along the way, or some advice that you've gotten for other folks that are working with partners that has been valuable that you would like to share.
Yeah, well, again, I'll go being a partner person for so many years. It is very misunderstood sometimes from the CRO perspective, from customer success. And I think that even from a startup perspective, there's so much opportunity to take a look at partnerships to drive your business without having to invest in building a large team. And starting to understand, and it's important as you start to build your APIs, what are those adjacencies, and put that in your product roadmap. And I think from a partnership perspective, they always bring partners in, and the first question they ask is, can you get me an Accenture or a Deloitte to go to market? And it's like, well, you don't have to think about partnerships that way. You can, and leveraging other people's partner programs to help with credits, marketing, and growth that you don't have to use of your own. And so, telling the young startups, look at partnerships very differently and much more strategically in terms of how you, in the early days, start to drive, the adjacency, the data play, and the pull through.
I love that. Gosh, ROI is even bigger when the I part is not as big, right?
Yeah, always. I have a tendency to show revenue over cost rather than cost over revenue these days.
That's terrific. Well, Robin, thank you again for joining, and really appreciate you. Gosh, you've just been a wealth of knowledge for any small startup or medium startup that wants to work with Google or is working with Google and trying to understand the how to navigate and figure out how to work better with Google. So thank you for sharing so much.
Well, thank you for having me, Chip. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Good. Well, thanks everybody for joining, and for Robin Ritenour, I'm Chip Rodgers, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining. Oh, there we go.